Man, we've got a scary story for you today, kind of a doomsday thing that, you know, intelligent scientists are saying it isn't maybe a question of if, it's a question of when, and what will it do? So we'll tell you about that. We'll tell you about a little girl molested at the age of 6, wanted to kill herself. What a story. But it's considered the cornerstone of American democracy. What's that? The right to vote. Some states want to protect it by requiring voters to show a picture ID to show that they're not voting 2 or 3 different times.
Well, critics argue that requiring an ID restricts some people's rights. Jennifer Wishon has this look at the controversy.
What you have to show before you vote depends on where you live, but there's a push across the country to require voters to show a photo ID, proving they are who they say they are.
They will prevent people who are not eligible to vote from voting. And where will that make a difference? Well, it'll make a difference in any state where there is a close election.
In the last year, 9 states passed new voter ID laws. This year, the issue will make it in front of 32 state legislatures. South Carolina passed one of the more stringent laws. James McLawhorn Jr., a longtime resident and civil rights activist, says he can't believe this is happening today.
It's reminiscent of some of the Jim Crow's laws of the past that were designed to restrict people basic fundamental right to vote.
Whether or not certain states can require photo ID at the polls has everything to do with race. Under the Voting Rights Act, 16 states that historically suppressed the minority vote must still get permission from the U.S. Justice Department to change their voting requirements. The department, led by Attorney General Eric Holder, shot down the South Carolina law, along with another in Texas. A law passed in Virginia is currently under review. South Carolina is fighting the decision.
I'm a minority. It's not an attack against minorities.
Palmetto State Governor Nikki Haley tells CBN News lawmakers aren't trying to suppress votes. They're working to protect elections from corruption.
We're saying if you have to have a picture ID to buy Sudafed, if you have to have a picture ID to get on a plane, why shouldn't you have to show picture ID to protect the integrity of the voting process?
Supporters say people looking to commit voter fraud need only go to states that don't require ID and cast a ballot for someone who's dead. According to a recent Pew study, nearly 2 million dead people are listed on America's voter rolls. Nearly 3 million are registered to vote in more than one state, and 24 million voter registrations nationwide are no longer valid.
One of the key principles of any fair election is making sure that the person who casts a vote is legally eligible to do so, and the fairest way to do that is by making sure that individuals authenticate their citizenship when they register to vote and authenticate their identity when they appear at the polling place to vote.
Critics like McLawhorn argue many minorities don't have photo IDs or even the supporting documents like a birth certificate to get one. When the Justice Department compared South Carolina's list of registered voters to its list of people with a government-issued photo ID, it found minority voters were nearly 20% less likely than white voters to have an ID. In 2008, minority voters turned out in record numbers to help elect President Obama. Now that the 2012 presidential election is just 8 months away, McLawhorn says there's a perception in the black community that Republican lawmakers are trying to keep black voters from participating.
I think it's very interesting that until we had this type of turnout on the part of ordinary citizens and minority people, people were not talking about voter ID or other restrictions, you know. So I think one must ask the question, why now?
But emotions are likely heating up because of the pending election. Data shows voter ID laws have been a hot topic in state legislatures for years. Over the past decade, 21 states have passed major new voting requirements. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News.
Thanks, Jennifer. There has been massive fraud, massive fraud. People would go and vote in one precinct, then they'd run down the block and they'd vote in another one and another one, and there was no way of identifying, and there was all kinds of corruption. And all you have to do is say, here's my driver's license, or here's an ID. Here in Virginia, my voting precinct, they ask for identification. They know who I am, but I still have to show an ID. I mean, it's And it's no big inconvenience that you have to have some sort of an ID in order to get a driver's license. As Nikki Haley said, to get on an airplane, you have to prove who you are. I mean, what's such a big deal? I mean, it isn't a suppression of minorities, but nevertheless, that's the cry and the hue and cry. But I think we need to have integrity in our polling system, and that the people who vote are actually citizens who are entitled to vote. And I think the American people need to know that our elections are free from fraud, and I think that's what it amounts to. Well, Wendy Griffith has the rest of our top stories in the CBN newsroom. Wendy?
Pat, Sweden is moving to become a cashless society. Some experts believe that within 20 years, coins and cash will cease to exist there. Many people in Sweden are already using little, if any, cash. In many Swedish cities, public buses don't accept coins or bills, and some businesses and bank offices only operate through electronic transactions. Even some churches are moving away from cash. At least one has installed card readers so worshipers can make an offering electronically. Pat, are we talking about the end times here?
We're talking about Big Brother for sure. Wendy, you know, that sounds so nice, and the banks want it desperately because it is so efficient and it's so cheap. But what would happen if some Big Brother came in and canceled what's in a computer? That's where your money is now. If your money is in a computer and they erase the memory banks of the computer, you don't have any money anymore. And the Bible talks about a time when we can't buy or sell. It could happen in a cashless society when Big Brother could come in and literally take away the wealth of everybody. Wendy?
Pat, fears of anti-Semitism in Europe are rising again after a deadly shooting at a Jewish school in Toulouse, France. Jewish schools, synagogues, and other institutions around the world have increased their security after the tragedy. Chris Mitchell has that story.
The shooter killed 4 people: Rabbi Jonathan Sandler, his 2 sons, Aryeh, 6 years old, Gabriel, 3, and 8-year-old Miriam Montenegro, the principal's daughter. Eyewitnesses described a grisly scene.
First of all, they heard the shoots, and then the parents shouting and crying. And when he came out, he saw the little children on the floor with blood around them, and that's it.
What is the sense of killing 3 children at the age of 3 or 5 or 6? What does it sell? Where does it lead? There was no good answer.
French police said the same gun used at the school was also used to kill 3 French soldiers last week. A massive manhunt is underway for the murderer. French President Nicolas Sarkozy called the shootings a frightening tragedy. And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu didn't rule out a strong, murderous, anti-Semitic motive. The Israeli Foreign Ministry announced the victims will be buried here in Israel. The murders also increased the sense of fear many Jews feel living in France.
I feel really that we are not as comfortable in France as we were. We feel that the situation is turning. Even most of the French say, no, we are not anti-Semite. On the contrary, the Jews are here for many centuries and so on. But there is a growing anti-Semitism.
Although the identity of the murderer is still unknown, the former head of Israel's Counterterrorism Bureau warned a coalition of jihadist organizations have made a decision to attack Israeli and Jewish targets wherever they can. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Thanks, Chris. House Republicans are suggesting cutting tax rates as part of their new budget. The plan would mean only 2 tax rates for Americans, 10% and 25%. Right now, there are 6 rates. The plan would also cut the business tax rate to 25% and would almost completely get rid of taxes on overseas profits. The Republicans also want to do away with the alternative minimum tax. That was originally created as a tax on the wealthy, but now it's hitting a growing number of middle-class Americans. Republicans admit their plan has no chance of becoming law, but they wanted to create a contrast with President Obama's budget proposals. Pat?
Well, Wendy, it's a shocking truth that the Senate has not passed a budget in over 1,000 days. Who ever heard of a legislative body that has a mandate to bring forth a budget every year, who cannot pass one? Why not? Why won't they pass one? Well, they don't want to come on record for something that they might perceive as unpopular. And so they're cowardly, and they hide behind Majority Leader Harry Reid, and they say, let's just keep kicking this one down the road. Let's not pass a budget, and let's just act like we're having a continuing resolution or something. They have to deal with the fiscal crisis we've got in our nation. The Republicans in the House have taken a bold step forward. And what's going to happen? This will be a blueprint for all of their candidates to run on. And if they will pass it in the House, it will show to the American people, here is a budget that will bring us into some kind of balance in the future. It's something that'll curtail some of the runaway costs in entitlements, and will lower some of the tax rates. It will make it more sensible, more reasonable. It's a beautiful document. So Congressman Ryan is a genius. He's good at this sort of thing. And so the candidates of the Republican Party are going to say, this is our manifesto. And the Democrats in the Senate are going to vote it down at their peril. And if they did vote for it, I imagine the president would veto it. But that is exactly the weapon that the Republicans need to run on this fall, to tell the American people, we care about saving the American dream and the fiscal stability of this great nation. We care about it, and we're going to do something about it. And if the other side won't do anything about it, then let's change them. Wendy?
Mitt Romney and Rick Santorum have also been talking about the economy as they campaign to win votes in today's Illinois primary. Romney took aim at President Obama's economic policies.
This administration thinks our economy is struggling because the stimulus was too small. The truth is, this economy is struggling because our government is too big, too intrusive, too invasive of our economic freedoms.
Santorum said at one point the economy was not a top issue in the campaign, but he later amended that. He says the economy and unemployment were important, but they are just symptoms of bigger problems, the intrusion of government and the erosion of freedom. Well, a little relief may be on the way at the gas pump. The Saudis say they want to keep oil prices around $100 a barrel. Oil has been as high as $110 in the last few weeks. The Saudis are expected to start sending more oil to the U.S. as well. Many economists have said rising energy prices could hurt the world economy. Pat, do you think this move by Saudi Arabia will make much of a difference?
It'll make you sick. They've got us by the throat, and they want to bleed us, but they don't want to bleed us so much that we'll die. That's what it amounts to, Wendy. They want to keep the sucker alive so they can keep on bleeding him, draining his blood, whatever. And they want to keep the price at $100. Give me a break. That's going to be very high and very costly for the American people. But any dislocation of the supply coming out of the Straits of Hormuz, anything that happens will run the price up. And so I don't think that's going to make a whole lot of difference.
Got to develop those energy sources at home.
Like I've been saying, my goodness, natural gas. We got so much of the natural gas, and all we've got to do is to have a technology which lets big trucks run it, buses run it, and then to create technology which liquefies the natural gas and makes it into petroleum so cars can run on it. I mean, it's a natural. That's where we ought to spend our money, not on some pie-in-the-sky Solyndra or Chevrolet Volts. All those things are failures.
The U.S. Supreme Court will not hear a discrimination case filed by college Christian groups. A Christian fraternity and sorority at San Diego State University challenged a school policy that forbids them from insisting members follow religious standards. Those standards include marriage between a man and a woman and no premarital sex. A lower court ruled the school's policy does not violate the Constitution. The policy has made Christian groups ineligible for student funding and other privileges. A new report shines the light on 16 nations for violating religious rights. China, Saudi Arabia, Iran, and North Korea are repeat offenders on the annual report from the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. Egypt, Nigeria, Iraq, and Pakistan are also named for failing to stop attacks on religious minorities. And this year, Turkey joins the list of the worst violators. Countries identified as religious rights violators can be subject to sanctions. And you can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website, that's cbnnews.com.